Okay, we're live.
All right. Hey, everybody in the video world, YouTube, intranet, whatever you want to call it. We have hit some cool weather here in Indiana. It's like in the 50s and rainy and cold, and we got some incredible flannel in, and I was like, it's time to make a rag quilt. We've got to make a rag quilt. And rag quilts are absolutely the easiest, funnest, great beginner project. I love making them because they just are done so quickly. So I'm going to show you some kind of tips and tricks. I'm not using a pattern. How fun is that? I mean, this is really just off the cuff. It gives you lots of opportunity to adjust the size to make it whatever you want. So what I have here are 2 half-yard cuts of complementary contrasting fabrics. They are flannel. Typically we use flannel or homespun to make rag quilts because they do a nice job of shredding. Here's one we have made out of homespun, and you can see this fluffiness is what we're going for. This fluffy, furry, kind of, you know, I don't know, furry rag. It's like a rag. So this is typically what you say when you have a rag quilt. And the back is all nice and flat. And then the front has these rags on it. So I'm going to show you how we make this happen. So I have half-yard cuts. The cool part about a rag quilt is you can make the squares whatever size you want. So I did a baby blanket one time, and I made these squares, I think they were 3 or 4 inch. They were a little tiny, but it was a baby quilt, and I wanted a lot of texture for the baby to have to handle. But you can make these squares 10 inch, which, okay, if you had a flannel layer cake, already cut. You're in the groove on that one. Or you can cut your own pieces, 8, 10, 12. Gosh, you could do them 18-inch squares if you want. It's your quilt, so you can make these squares whatever size you want, but you're basically going to just sew the squares together. So do the math of how big you want it, and then make your squares accordingly. Here's my easy way. This is a half yard of fabric that came cut. I just had half yard, 2 cuts, 2 contrasting pieces. So one's different than the other. They can all be the same. You could make a rag quilt, the entire quilt, all the same color fabric if you wanted to. There's nothing wrong with that. But I have right now an 18-inch piece because it's a half a yard. So half of a yard would make a 9-inch square. So basically, I'm just going to cut these pieces, these half-yard cuts that I got from the quilt store, at a half yard. Now, we cut our half yards generous. Every cut you get in here is going to be at least a thumb width, which means it's an inch or so bigger than what it actually says. But rag quilts are really forgiving if they're not square, if they're not exactly perfect. So I know I can take these half yard cuts and cut 9-inch squares. So that's what I have here is my 2 half yards layered on top of each other. These are the 2 I want to contrast. And I'm working on Dawn's table, and it's backwards to me, but that's okay. Here we go. So I'm going to cut at 9-inch because half of an 18-inch piece would be 9-inch. So I'm going to cut 2 9-inch pieces. So that means my squares are going to end up being 9-inch squares. Okay? There we go. Now, when you're making a rag quilt, what you do is you layer these squares together. So what I want are my right sides both facing opposite each other. So I want my wrong sides together. So before I cut my blocks, what I do is I take my fabric and I put it together like this. Now, I'm breaking every quilt rule you've ever learned from Dawn. So don't let Dawn see the video.
Dawn's watching live, by the way.
Oh, no, Dawn, no. Okay, well, I'm breaking all the quilt rules. This is the.
We're breaking all your rules, Dawn. How do you feel about that?
Slash and dash, make a rag quilt super fast idea. Okay, so I put them wrong sides together. Okay, so these are my blocks. Now I cut it a 9-inch this way. I'm gonna cut that nasty old selvage off because we don't want that. You could leave it, but it's not gonna fray nice, so I'm gonna cut that off of there.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah, it won't fray. It's not going to fray. Okay, so here we go. And it's not perfect, folks. It doesn't have to be. That's the beauty of these quilts. Slide over just a little bit. There we go. So I'm going to wonk off that first piece, have that scrap piece. Now, I'm going to make, these are 9-inch, so I'm just going to continue to cut 9-inch squares. 9-inch. So there's a block. Look, I've cut the front and the back to my block. Already done. And I'm going to cut another 9-inch square. But now I could have made these 6. I could have made them 5. I could have made them, I'll make whatever size I want. If I got a 9-inch and I want to make a small, like a 4 piece in here, then I could cut them 4.5 inches and sew them together. Okay? So here we go. Cut my 9-inch squares. Got it. Cut all my 9-inch squares. So I'm going to cut in. When you make one of these quilts, depending on the size you want, you're looking at about 10 yards of fabric-ish, something like that. Depends on how big you want to make it. These get heavy. I made, crazy that I am, I made a king-size rag quilt one time that was so heavy, it literally took like an army to put it off and on the bed. So I don't advise that. The person that received it was thrilled, though, because she was cold all the time, and it was perfect for her. So here I have, these are my blocks. These are 9-inch blocks. So in the middle of those blocks then goes a little piece of batting. So what you're going to do, here we go, grab my batting. Somebody came in and messed me up for a second. Okay, no, here we go. So batting. You all have these pieces of batting left over that you never quite know what to do with. So for a 9-inch square, I'm going to cut 8-inch square batting, okay? So that gives me basically a 1/2 inch extra all the way around. So I need to cut out 8-inch square battings. And this is truly, we're not talking perfectionist here. I'm just going to cut me an 8-inch square. 8-inch, and I'm just lopping it off here. I mean, I'm literally, this is an 8.5 inch ruler, so I'm pretty confident I'm going to get what I want. And again, okay, that's got a cut edge. If I was really good, I would use some nice scissors and cut it. But look what I can do. I'm a cheater, pumpkin eater. I just take that right off. That's close enough to my 8-inch square. Now, I'm going to throw this in the middle. This really is the anti-Dawn thing, because I'm breaking every rule. So then I put this in the middle.
We should have the dueling of the two rag quilts. You make a rag quilt, and then Dawn makes a rag quilt.
Right. Okay, so now, you see in my 9-inch square, my 8-inch square now gives me 1/2 inch there, 1/2 inch there, approximately 1/2 inch there, same thing. And I'm making a sandwich. I'm making a quilt sandwich. Okay? So now I have this nice square, and in the middle is my little piece of batting. And honestly, this is a great way to use up those extra scrap pieces of batting you have no purpose for. I will say, if you use warm and natural batting and the flannel, it's going to weigh a ton. You can also just use another piece of flannel in here if you'd like. Or I've even seen these quilts done with no batting, because the flannel, the 2 layers of flannel could be really heavy. It's your quilt. You make it what you want. Okay, so that's my batting pieces. Now, I'm going to use Dawn's sewing machine. What? But I'm going to show you how you sew these. So, I have my squares with my batting in them. So here they are. And what I have to do, first of all, you're going to want a walking foot, because flannel likes to shift. So Peter said on one of the posts on Facebook, he said he'd never made a flannel quilt yet. So here's my one thing that's a kind of a Dawn rule. I would absolutely use a walking foot with flannel, because flannel tends to like to wiggle. So I'm going to start in at the point here at the corner. And you see how this isn't perfectly matching up? I don't care. That's actually going to add a little bit to the interest of it. So I'm going to put this down. And here's the important part. You got to kind of lock these stitches. And I've not used this machine, so I'm going to use stitch 3 because it locks. She's a pedal pusher, isn't she? Dawn pushes the pedal, not this chick, man. I'm using that button. So I'm going to unplug her foot. I got to put it all back, or when she comes back, she'll be annoyed. So it's going to lock my stitch. And then there she goes. Now I'm just sewing to this corner right here. So I don't even have to mark it. All I got to do is just go corner to corner and lock the stitch. So see, there's my first piece. Cut. Okay. Now I'm going to go back and I'm going to go the other way. Corner to corner. Okay. And I chose the locking stitch, so it's locking when it starts. Goes all the way. And this, I mean, this is great because you can do these really, really fast. I'm going to that corner. Okay, so there's one. Here's another one. It's got a piece of back batting in it, just the same place. It's kind of centered. You know, it's close. It's like in the center, close. But this is all the quilting that's going to get. So it's you're quilting the front of the quilt and the back of the quilt at the same time, which makes it even better. No, let's see, start. This isn't my machine. It's so funny how we get used to our machines. I mean, you know, I could be on my machine and I won't even think twice about what I'm pushing and poking. But definitely use your walking foot. Definitely use a good quality thread, because this part of what you do to get this quilt raggy is you wash it. So I would probably use a cotton thread that's going to shrink equally and work well with the fabric. Whoops, I made a boo-boo. Lock and stop. Needle out. See those points? I should have done her leader.
Suggest the stitch length.
She's got, okay, it automatically turned on at 2.2. I would probably actually go a little longer. I would probably go more to a 3. This isn't bad. This certainly won't hurt anything. It's easier to rip out a 3 than it is a 2.2. Just saying. That's kind of me at the end of the day. It's all about what I got to rip out. Okay, so now I'm going to make however many squares I want. So, you know, if I want a lap quilt, say I want a 54 by, do easy numbers, 54 by 63, and I do 9-inch squares, then I'm going to need 6 across the top and 9 across the side. So I can do the math pretty easily to figure out how big I want my quilt if I use whatever size squares. If I use 10-inch squares, then I'm going to need, you know, 10 times 10 is going to give me 100 quilt by 100 quilt. I don't know that I want that big, but it's just a math problem. So I make as many of these as I want. I like to mix these up. I do this very random. I'm not a matchy-matchy kind of gal. So you could certainly do like all this color on one side and all this color on the other side. But when I do my quilts, I like to see them mismatched. When you look at this quilt, see, and I made this sample ages ago. So my squares, this side is very random, and so is this side very random. Okay?
Did that use a batting?
Yes, this has batting in it. It has thin batting in it.
With the homespun.
With the homespun. So these are random. Now, some people are going to want to make all their squares and lay them out on a board and make sure that that's fine. It's your quilt if it makes you happy. This chick, I'm just throwing them in a bag and working off of it. Okay, so now I'm going to take these two seams, and you know what, I am going to do it this way just so you can see, but I'm going to take one block and lay it on top of the other. Now I've locked these stitches. That lock is kind of important. And now my batting is in a 1/2 inch-ish, okay? And now I'm going to sew, and I'm going to sew close to that batting. I want to try and catch just the edge of that batting. So
Capi made me one for Christmas, and I love it and use it all the time. Thank you,
Lisa.
sis.
Is that my sister-in-law, Lisa?
Yep.
That's Lisa. Hi.
Yep.
Are you supposed to be at work, girl? I bet she's supposed to be at work. Okay, so here's part of your trick. When you do this, and this is the part that gets interesting. So see how this corner comes together and this is all fluffy up in here? You don't want to start sewing here and go across. You want to start kind of at that point and come across so that this can fluff. Because if I sew here and here, then I got kind of a hot mess in there. So when you start sewing your blocks together, come in about, I guess it's almost 1 inch, probably a little less than that, and start right in there. So I'm going to start like a 1/2 inch and a 1/2 inch. 1/2 inch down, 1/2 inch in. And here we go.
So 1/2 inch seam allowance?
Yeah, it's a 1/2 inch seam allowance. You'll see why here in a minute. All right, here we go. And I'm going to sew. Now I've set the locking stitch on this machine, so it's locking and automatically at the beginning and end of each stitch. I've just saved myself a step is all I'm doing. Okay. Now, so see, there's my seam, and it's a big, fat, wide seam. Look how wide it is.
Oh, nice.
Big and fat. So I'm going to sew these squares. See, there's my back side. Look, it makes diamonds here. It's just kind of fun how it comes together. See how this come together? But this part's open, okay? But I lock that stitch at each end. Now I'm going to take, and this is kind of what got the whole discussion started, was I was talking about these scissors. These are specifically, they have a spring in them. See the spring? Wah, wah. And they're very, very nice and sharp. Here's the deal. You only want to cut up to, where's it going to show better? I guess it's going to show right here. You only want to cut right up to that line that you sewed. I don't want to go past that over into here. I want to stay right inside that. So what I would do, and Dawn's voice got tape. Where's her tape?
Where's your tape,
Oh, here
Dawn?
it is. I got it. So what I would do is on these scissors, I would make myself a little line. Oops, with the tape. This is hard to do while I'm on this side. Right there. See if I get this little piece to do. But see, I just inside, I'm about 1/8 of an inch inside of that. Tear. There. And that's not in the scissors. So I know not to get up past that. You see what I mean? That gives me a distance. Are you following me? So when I cut now, I can see that tape, and I want the edge of the fabric not to go beyond that. Because now you have to go along and you have to cut. And you want to cut about 1/4 inch pieces. Now, I will tell you that doing that on an entire quilt, your hand gets tired. That's why this spring is important. These scissors, I think, are 21 bucks, but it's $21 that avoids carpal tunnel, and you don't have to have surgery. So I'm going to just cut, and I put my tape line on there. There we go. And I'm going to just keep cutting. Might do better in that part. So cut, 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 cut. And you know, if you don't, you just don't want to cut your sewing. That's the point. All right, I'm going to kind of cut wider and cut quicker. But this is a great sew the quilt together and then sit at the TV and just cut. Now, when you get to your corner over here, here's the other trick. I've seen this done several ways. Here's what I like to do. I like to cut this part kind of at an angle against that and against that. So that I have this little piece here. Okay, so that those still fuzz, but they're not, I'm not cutting that out completely, because if I cut it out completely, I lose my part that I stitched with the knot. Okay, and then I would cut down this side because there would be one attached to it. And then
you have a dog watching your video.
Oh yay! Oh, is it Chloe? So then when you put this, so it kind of fluffs a little bit, and I didn't cut these quite as tight as I would, but this is all going to fluff now when you wash it and dry it. So when you wash and dry this, you will have a bazillion gazillion little threads everywhere. And every time you wash and dry this quilt, it just gets softer and softer and fluffier and fluffier and fluffier. And so I've made several of these rag quilts, not just for my sister-in-law, but my son has one. He's in Tokyo. He has one. He brings it home when he comes home so I can wash it because they don't have the same kind of washer and dryers over there we do. And the more you wash it, the more you love it because it just gets really super soft. So that kind of is a rag quilt in a hot minute. Simple, easy, no pattern needed. We actually, I think we have a pattern. If you're a pattern person, here is a pattern that basically shows you just what I exactly did. It's a free pattern. And it gives you some dimensions. It recommends homespun or flat. It even gives you the option of how to do it with a little small 4 square in there instead of the whole big. Oh, no, I lied. Never mind. Don't pay attention to that. But it does. This is a pattern if you want a pattern. But easy beginner, great starter. These would make great Christmas gifts. That's how my sister-in-law got hers. So, yeah, it's a great little Christmas gift because you can sew these up. And we got, like I say, this gorgeous flannel in that got us talking about rag quilts. So, there you go. Any questions, you can always email us. I'm Capi at alwaysinstitches1.com. Our website is www.alwaysinstitches1.com. And we just love to help you out. These are the scissors you got to have. Need the spring loaded. And then flannel. Thanks a lot. Happy stitching.
And if you like the video, please give us a thumbs up, and then any questions or comments, leave those in the comments below, and we'll be reading them this afternoon.
Yep. Peter's waiting to hear from you. Thanks.